So for the background, when it comes to backgrounds, they're very important to control where and what your audience is paying attention to. The background should either enhance the photograph, or I'm sorry, enhance the video, or not affect the video. But the objects chosen in the shots should not distract the viewer. That's key. Backgrounds are a part of your presentation of information. These tips I will share with you, I've learned from basically my time as doing interior design photography as well as being a filmmaker. And how I like to categorize it, there are different types of backgrounds that I'd like to loosely categorize. It's aesthetically pleasing, related to content, related to personality, and neutral. So with that, you can mix, aesthetically pleasing can go with neutral or related to content or personality, etc., but that's why they are loosely categorized. Basically, in the background, no object in the shot should take away from you, the subject. As I said before, the background should either enhance the video or not affect the video, but there is a sweet spot between distracting and interesting backgrounds. You can have objects in your shot, but they should have a purpose to be there. Like maybe some books on the shelf represents your reader. Having gaming posters on the wall illustrates your love of games. Having cameras on a shelf behind you might illustrate your love of photography or filmmaking. Objects like these are representing your content and or personality, because you can be talking about cameras and have books in the background, and that's also totally okay as long as these objects in the background are not distracting. The audience's eyes will go straight for the distracting and unrelated object, which will then take away from your subject, and therefore the message you want to give will be more difficult for the viewer to grasp. When there are objects in the room that are relevant in a uniform sort of way, then the audience is looking at the objects as an extension of yourself, and therefore brings the focus back to you and your commentary. For the neutral background, that's when there are plain, solid color walls. Also, there would be either no objects or very few neutral objects in the room that are also uniform, so the audience is not distracted by it and proceeds to just focus on the subject. When I'm saying uniform, by the way, what I'm really meaning is a straight line, level, vertical, horizontal, but these objects themselves don't have to be symmetrical, but the placement of them should have a flow to it. With neutral backgrounds, there is nothing there to distract the audience. However, the neutral object, like a chair, bed, desk, wardrobe, what have you, can actually become distracting if there are other objects on it, like clothing, or a bed isn't made, or paper scattered around, trash. Things like that make a neutral background and transform it into a distracting background, which we don't want. Of course, there will be some exceptions, like say you're doing a vlog and you're just getting out of bed and the background might be messy, but that's actually related to the content. It's bringing your audiences into your life, into the life of the vlogger, which is actually having the audience's attention be focused on the vlogger even more, because the background is guiding the audience to directly focus on the subject. But with a basic talking head video, that is usually not the case, and any object should not be distracting for the audience. I would honestly just recommend not really putting anything on the floor unless it's a big piece of furniture, and most of the things have a uniform to it that are in the shot, as well as you can maybe put things on top of a wardrobe or a table that's very uniform, very level and straight, or putting things on the actual wall. But that does not necessarily mean you don't have to, as I said, that doesn't, even though they shouldn't, nothing should be distracting for the audience, but as I said, that does not necessarily mean you don't have to have anything in the shot. It just means in the back should not be distracting and related to you in some way, or neutral. Just wood or wooden, or just a wood or a wooden / modern wardrobe. But usually if there is trash, messy papers, objects thrown around or on top of each other, for instance, they're seen as more distracting, and the audience, it seems unnatural to the audience, so then they'll go straight for it subconsciously, which will then end up leading the audience away from your story, and that's not what we want. Also, when there is another thing is like neutral could be too neutral in a way, as in there's not much dimension between you and your background, so the foreground versus the background. So when there's a completely white wall, it would be beneficial to have a painting on it or something else that represents you or your content, and it should be straight and level. This is to add dimension to your image. So again, even in a even in a neutral background, it should be uniform on a straight and level. It should be uniform, straight, and level. Basically, another thing is there should be a nice look to the background that has good composition. I would actually suggest this. Look at the background as if you would take a photograph of just the background alone without you in it. If you like the way it looks, that's actually a good indicator that it has good composition to it, and these add that three-dimensional look to the image. Lighting can also affect the backgrounds and how they look. There should be a contrast between you and the background. For instance, backgrounds should be a little darker than your subject. This is a way for the audience to differentiate between what they should focus on and which should be your subject. Also, a lighting tip that would also help differentiating the foreground and the background is to use a light behind you in order to create a halo effect. This effect brings the viewer to focus on your subject and not the background. It's important to diffuse the light, by the way, because it softens up the image. You don't need anything fancy, just either a plastic bag or even a shower curtain. A shower curtain would be a good way to diffuse like a big window, for instance. Diffusing the light also makes the light just a little darker, so keep that in mind. It'll help tone down some natural light coming from the window. As I said before, if you are using a window, use those daylight cool 5000K or higher light bulb, preferably LED, so you can do those cheap diffusion tricks. Here's an example of something you can use if you don't have as much control of your background, and it's called a backdrop stand, and it's adjustable, and basically what you can do is you hang like fabric behind you or something that's like flat, anything like that, in order to mask what's actually behind, and so you have much more control of what your background can look like. And it's really cheap. It's $36. I haven't personally used it, but it seems like a good option if you wanted to go that route. This specific one I found on Amazon, and that's why I've included this information so you can find it yourself if you are interested. Now for Headroom. So for the Headroom, this is for framing a shot. It's important to think about the distance between the subject's head and the top of the frame. Now, of course, when I'm looking at my camera right now, it's actually not showing me an image, so I'm hoping that my framing is still correct. But I do this little trick basically, but I'll just get into that in a second. Headroom or air above the subject should be about 1 inch above the head. Why you want it to be about 1 inch is because there is no new information coming in from the empty space if there is more than that on top of the head, and this makes it distracting for the viewer because they subconsciously are looking not at you but the wall. And you're the subject. You're wanting to the video basically is like a person, and you want to be talking to the video or communicating with an audience just like you would in real life. So when you're looking at someone in person, you're not actually looking over at the wall. You're usually looking at their face. So we want to match the experience in the video production because it's mimicking what we do in real life. So here's the tip I wanted to say. So a tip for figuring out Headroom is to use 2 or 1 or 2 fingers to the side and put them on top of the head and frame/position the camera based on that. And I say 1 or 2 fingers because everyone's hand size is different, but about an inch distance between the top of the head and the top of the image is pretty good. And also another thing is it's just the baseline. This should be like the baseline shot. Hopefully it's correct here with me right now, but this should be like your baseline shot. If you're, I communicate with my hands, I like to move around and stuff like that. With that in mind, I might be a little lower at some points. I might be a little higher than it. So my head might be cropped off just a little bit. And that's okay because we're moving with it. These are natural movements, But that should be kind of like the baseline. You shouldn't start off with it too high or too low. Start off with 1 inch. And if you move a little, that's also okay.